Dude, I went to Vegas recently. That place sucks. When I was a kid, probably around like 14, my middle of nowhere town got a really fancy arcade right in the middle of our local strip mall. And it was a flat rate arcade, so what you would do is you would walk in and you would pay like 13-ish bucks and you could just go wild for as long as you wanted. And this wasn't one of those like Dave and Buster's types arcades with ticket games, you know, like skee-ball and basketball courts. It had old cabinets and a wall of retro consoles like the NES and the N64s. And my dad would usually take us there because there were a lot of games that he liked from when he was a kid. You know, stuff like Pac-Man, Galaga, the old Punch-Out, Bubble Bobble. But this place was huge and it had a ton of options. It was probably the size of like a Walgreens or like a Quick Trip. The ones that I liked were Classic Tetris, Time Crisis, and Top Skater. But one day I walked by this magical machine full of beautiful art of my favorite superheroes and that one guy that I knew from Smash Bros. Playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in 2015 was my gateway drug into diving deep into the fighting game genre as a whole. And of course, I had already known about the big hitters at the time, like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, but this is where I really found my love of the game. And from then on, I watched all kinds of tutorials and tried to practice whatever I could get my hands on. I would play Third Strike against other people in the arcade, I would win some small locals in Smash 4, and it had become my life goal to ruin every social gathering by asking people to play Marvel 3 with me, and no one ever really wanted to play. And I was always a super competitive person growing up, and I think I realize now that it takes a very specific kind of masochistic idiot to get into traditional fighting games. Now, way back in the day when retro arcades were beginning to take popularity, the most people could get out of playing against each other for competition on most machines was competing for the high score spot, which in most cases meant it was just you playing the game for as long as you could while you were probably robbing the time of someone to your side who wanted to get in next. Or maybe you were playing Gauntlet or something, I don't know. But this kind of interaction changed with the rise of a certain game that would change the arcade landscape forever. Something that would allow two people to go against each other at the same time. Something with gameplay that would task two players with using specific fighting moves on a street-level set. It was Karate Champ. It was Karate Champ. Despite its tiny cultural impact now, Karate Champ is famous for being the game that put one-on-one fighting games on the map back in the 80s. In this game, two players would sit shoulder to shoulder at the machine and use this kind of unorthodox double stick style setup to try and inch forward or backward to your opponent and try and win with a single strike. If you get hit, you get a point. You get enough points, you win the game. It wasn't really more in-depth than that. Down the line, arcades would see games with similar concepts come and go, but one that would make history was the release of Street Fighter 1 back in '87. Street Fighter 1 introduced elements that we still have in the series today, like it starred Ryu taking on a World Martial Arts tournament to face the eventual final boss, and series mainstay Sagat, who was a Muay Thai champion. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And there was a two-player mode that was simply just Ryu versus Ken, meaning that there was no character choice of any kind. And I have to say, I have no idea how this series went on after this. Like, if any of you have ever played Street Fighter 1, you will know exactly what I mean. There was this version of the arcade machine with the typical 6-button setup, like, okay, light, medium, heavy, punch, and kick, but your attack wouldn't come out until the button was released, not when the button was pressed, which is mad weird considering the tight timing that fighting games are now known to require. And this logic would also apply when you were trying to do any special moves, which to their credit would do insane amounts of damage in this game. But there was also another version of this machine that only had these two giant fuck-off buttons for punching and kicking that you would have to physically bop with your fist to input. And the idea was that depending on how hard you smack them would determine if it was a light, medium, or heavy attack. Like, what are we doing here? But surprisingly enough, this game was well-liked enough to get a sequel. And we all know that this is where the magic happens. And there are a million different versions of Street Fighter 2, so I'm just going to be as comprehensive in this small space as I possibly can. Also, before I go any further, I'd like to just say like, comment, and subscribe. I'm not going to show the statistic or whatever, but I just really like to hit 10K by the end of the year. From the get-go, it was clear that the player's enjoyment of Street Fighter 2 was supposed to be way more hingent on combat with other players. This is evident in things like an expansion to the roster of characters. In this initial release, we get iconic characters like Chun-Li, Guile, and Blanca, and in later versions, the roster would expand outwards with others like Cammy, Fei Long, and the boss characters from 1 and 2. Every which one of these characters would be representative of a different style of play that a player could pick up, which is an idea that fighting games try to take to the 1000th degree in the current day. Street Fighter 1 may have been a weird, backwards fever dream experiment game, but Street Fighter 2 was so influential that every single fighting game to this day has the same kind of UI readout, similar way to play, similar emphasis on mind games, same game objective. It was so prolific that it took until Super Smash Bros. Ultimate in 2018 to outsell it. I use all of this to illustrate that this is a genre that I really love and I'm really passionate about, whether it's the games themselves, the mentality of the people creating them, or the people involved in the community. And I want this video to exist to hopefully convince you into giving fighting games a try. If I'm being honest, I think that these past few years have been the absolute best time to start getting into fighting games. We've been going through a sort of fighting game renaissance. I don't know if I'm using that word right. All I know about are the paintings. We got 2 installments of the best series back to back, being Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8, which both came out with stunning visuals, rosters with someone for everyone, and new mechanics to keep their respective series fresh. And maybe you're thinking, but Will, these series have been around for decades, how could I possibly hope to beat anyone now? Well, I'm going to tell you something that a lot of people don't want to hear when they spend money on a game, but you are going to lose. Just like every game with online competition, there are people who have been playing these games for 25 years and go to tournaments and bring home the money, and then there's sniveling children, such as yourself. Like, look at this. You don't even know what that really was, but you know it was cool. When I think about the esports competitive scenes, what comes to mind first are like shooter tournaments, fighting game tournaments, and then like StarCraft or something. I know there's a lot of people that may hear the word esports and immediately bite their tongue, but fighting game tournaments have been around since before I was born, whether they were hosted straight out of the arcade or they moved into formal convention halls. But despite this, a lot of these events try to hold the same vibe as they did way back in '91 with Street Fighter 2, and you can really feel the historical reverence when you attend one of these events. But what defines competition in traditional fighting games is that sole responsibility on yourself to learn the game and outthink your opponent. Because when you play a team game like Overwatch or League or Apex, if you lose, you know, you can always go, oh, well, we lost because my team sucks, you know, there's no possible way that that was my fault. But in fighting games, all you have to rely on is me, myself, and I, so when you win, it's quite a rush, and it means that all the learning and training that you did paid off. But if you lose... Now, I specified earlier with the term traditional fighting game because I think it's important to distinguish between games like Street Fighter and Tekken and King of Fighters and all the 3D anime games that all look the same. Smash and other platform fighters are also in there somewhere, but I feel like that genre is insanely easy to get into and Smash doesn't need any more campaigning than it already has. I like Rivals a lot, though. I like Rivals. The arcade classics are defined by their flashy visuals and their demand for a greater amount of time needed to learn things like game mechanics, combo executions, and metagame play, as opposed to just mashing buttons until something happens, though there are some exceptions. This demand for a greater time put in is what filters a lot of people from spending their money on games like these, but I think that if you're an especially competitive person, that it can give you that kind of enjoyment that team games cannot provide. And I've had multiple friends who have gotten sick of the same old kinds of muddy gray team shooters coming out year by year who have come over to try Street Fighter or Guilty Gear and have never looked back. Despite what many long-term fans may tell you about their title of choice, the developers of these games do try to create an environment of fun competition with a wide cast of characters to facilitate the playstyles of any kind of player. There's the easy all-arounder karate Shotokan men that practice fundamentals and let you dip your toes in the water. There's zoners that let you decide your match from a distance. There's grapplers that reward patient play with huge close-up damage. There's rushdown characters that get in your opponent's face and keep them guessing until they're flat on the floor. There's whatever this is doing. What I mean to say is that there's a character for everyone and there's a game for everyone, from the slower methodical play of your traditional Street Fighters to the flashy 100-hit combos only seen in the Versus games. And I feel like there's a lot of people who think fighting games are really hard when that isn't even really true. Every major release in the last 5 or even 10 years has put forth a really good effort to make things more accessible for new players while not taking away tools from people with legacy skill. And of course, each game may capitalize on a different set of skills or utilize different mechanics or play in a different format than the last one entirely. Platform fighters kind of stick out in this way because on one hand they play kind of like a Mario game, but unlike typical fighting games where you're trying to take your opponent's health down to 0, you're trying to knock them out of the ring kind of like sumo wrestling. I think when you learn the basic mechanics of a game you want to get into, and then you start to see high-level tournament footage from professional players, it's fun to get sucked in and experiment with your character and see how you can get closer to that level. When Street Fighter 6 came out, it was a highly anticipated sequel to a series whose previous entry had soured a lot of people. So to see a game with new mechanics, great graphics, a fun story mode, and a cast full of new characters, a whole host of new players jumped in and turned into fans of the series. It also helps that Capcom's character design is the best in the business. And maybe you pick up one of these games and you find a character you really like, and you really like the single player mode, but you think, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. Lucky for you, there's years and years of resources all over the internet looking to answer anything you want to know, from specialized content creators to pro players alike. You want to see the flashiest possible combos available in your game? You want to see the hard statistics on your character's damage and speed? Or maybe you want the best possible advice from a tournament seasoned pro who's been in the game for decades. This is the avenue that is most likely to help you. Watching tournament sets and learning application is probably the quickest way to improve your game aside from just throwing yourself into the machine and learning what works. And speaking of, the more you watch tournaments, maybe you'll even develop an appreciation for your favorite competitors in the FGC, and learn to like their games and their character choices and their desire to compete. A lot of these players have pro wrestling type narratives and rivalries that go back years, and it's a fun kind of drama to get sucked into. In fact, this past year, history was set when longtime player Punk took home the gold at EVO for his performance in Street Fighter 6, the first American to do so for Street Fighter in like 20 years. These are the only times I feel patriotic, I swear to God. Maybe you prefer to root for a player because they play the same character as you, or maybe they have an off-the-wall low-tier pick that give them that underdog feel, or maybe you like the player's persona they give off and their desire to dominate all the competition in sight, or maybe you just rep them because they're from your country. The nature of fighting games being one-on-one makes every match a lot more intimate, and every player knows that their success rides on them and them alone. I'm going to highlight professional players as much as I do, because to me, following their highs and lows is a very, very large chunk of the enjoyment that I get out of being a part of the FGC. And just like Comic-Cons or anime expos, there's multiple large tournaments held all around every year where players from all over go to have fun and test their mettle against the world's best. There's things like Supernova, CEO, Frosty Faustings, official tournaments like Capcom Cup, and the Holy Grail, EVO. And I know everyone always says this, but EVO is like the Super Bowl of fighting games. EVO is a convention known for hosting every fighting game on the planet that people can get their hands on. From new games to shit from before I was born, and the first time I ever went was in 2017. I had somehow convinced my mom that for a vacation she should take her children to the hive of scum and villainy known as Las Vegas, Nevada, so that they could watch nerds play video games up on a soundstage. And yes, being in Vegas when you are a minor is fucking hilarious. The convention hall is historically so big that there's a huge arcade with everything that you could ever want. And every year, EVO picks 6 or 7 or 8 games to display on the main stage, typically whatever's the hottest that year. And in 2017, it was Street Fighter V, Tekken 7, Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2, Injustice 2, BlazBlue Central Fiction, King of Fighters 14, and my personal favorite, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And now, at the young impressionable age of 16, I was barely confident to even approach the main stage, let alone compete, but I had the time of my life doing usual con things like buying from the Artist Alley, I got to beta test Dragon Ball FighterZ, but the highlight of the con was just getting to experience how kind and fun-loving the larger FGC is. Everywhere I went, there were TVs set up with games of all kinds with friendly people waiting for someone to share a match with. I watched Tokido win Street Fighter V Grand Finals with my favorite character, cementing him as one of my favorite players in the business. I got to see Maximilian Dude playtest Marvel Infinite while all the onlookers bemoaned the state of the game. I took pictures with a bunch of people in the scene, and I got to pick up matches of my favorite games with random people whose only commonality I shared was with the love of the sport. Being there at that con surrounded me with the notion that despite the nature of competition filling the room, everyone that was attending was there for the spirit of fun and community. I'm not someone who usually participates in fandom. I really like to shut myself away and enjoy what I like how I like, but I can say without a doubt that the fighting game community is a joy to be a part of. Whether you're in the stands or if you're just watching on stream, it's fun to cheer when your favorites win or throw things and cry when they lose. And even if they don't win, it feels even better when you see them shake hands in the end. Online interactions are one thing, but what I can say defined my time there is that everyone was just unbelievably nice. From staff to art vendors, the grassroots origins of these tournaments and the passion that comes with it is present throughout the entire experience. And guess what? I loved it so much that I went back this year, baby, and it was fucking awesome. I took a bunch of pictures, I played demos for new games, I ate fried alligator, I even met Goku, okay? Even he was there. One of the best things about EVO 2024 is that if you were in the gaming space on Twitter in late July, I know that you saw this picture going around. Or maybe this one. and it reached outside of its target audience for good reason. We have longtime player Ryuji Hayashi, also known as Hayao, doing the splits before taking a win and advancing through losers quarterfinals in that year's Street Fighter Third Strike tournament. Hayao has a history of playing Third Strike for a very long time, with a 17th spot placement in that year's EVO Japan. But what outsiders may not know are the insane circumstances here to set up this win. You see, Street Fighter III Third Strike is commonly regarded as the best game in the series, but it has a notoriously skewed cast when it comes to the balance of the characters. And Hayao likes to play Hugo, of all things. In this match, he is up against Frankie BFG's Ken, a top 5 character versus Hayao's bottom 5. But I would like to remind the audience that this is a quarterfinal set of the largest tournament in the world, and Hayao did not get here on luck. As the set went on, both players kept trading rounds in a nail-biting showdown. It's a best of 5 with Mr. Hayao already winning 2 matches and Frankie winning 1. And I think it's worth mentioning that on the EVO main stage, they have like these normal little chairs, right? But for some reason, Hayao has decided to play like this, which like, go off, I guess, whatever works for you. But before the beginning of the match that would eventually win him the set, he decides to do this.
Oh my God! That hurts me, brother! Oh dear Lord!
The pants don't rip.
Magic pants!
And the crowd goes wild. And for those of you that don't know, Hayao is 41, okay? I can barely get out of my chair without my back cracking. This man is quite literally built different than I am. In the set-winning match for quarterfinals, both players eventually nickel and dime each other down to about half health. Frankie knows that if he loses this round, he's out of the tournament, so he starts getting desperate. Also, if you're a fighting game player and you realize that I'm not using the correct terminology here, just remember that this is aimed at people trying to get into the scene. After taking huge damage off a grapple from Hugo, he locks him back down to the ground with a throw of his own, in hopes to set up a combo into super to take this match.
He's not dead yet. Do we go for the cross up top?
But it is not enough. Now, grapplers are typically not very good in the air, and Hugo is no exception, so Frankie tries to meet Hayao in the air and hopes to kill him off chip damage with a powered-up special attack. But Hayao doesn't care. He meets him in the air, predicts an air Tatsumaki, perfectly blocks it, and then punishes it on the ground. This leaves both players at nothing but a sliver of health. And in an attempt to chip Hayao out again, Frankie goes for a super attack, but he stutters and mistimes it, allowing Hayao to run up from behind and knock his lights out, advancing further in the bracket. And in true Hayao fashion, he pops off and works the crowd. And this is the sportsmanship aspect of EVO that I would like to highlight again. Everyone's here to compete and try and prove who's the best, but everyone's having fun, the crowd is pumped, and it's not at anyone's expense. And while the showmanship of this moment is really entertaining outside of the sphere, the technicality of the interactions have cemented this match into fighting game history. Now, I didn't compete in any games again this year because, like, I'm really busy. But this goes to show that you can enjoy these games and events at any level of skill. And I would be remiss if I ended this video here and I didn't give you a jumping off point to try and build your own love for the scene. I think as long as you've broached the complexity that comes with learning fighting games, the first thing you need to consider is what game you want to pick, which is honestly the easiest part. The best advice I can offer is to simply pick what you think is the coolest. Maybe you like the flashy combos and characters of a versus game, or the slower methodical play of a Street Fighter game. There's a lot of shared tissue in this genre, so even if you don't like your initial choice, you can almost certainly fall back on your second. Now, once you pick your game, you need to become extremely intimate with its controls and mechanics. Is it a 6-button fighter or a 4-button fighter? Does it have some kind of meter? Is it 2D or 3D? Does it have Akuma? Some fighting games come with an easy mode option select for new players, but if you want to be good, do not use this. Most of these modes only allow for expression of the same combo over and over again with very, very, very limited application, and these will absolutely hamper your learning experience. It's like using a motorcycle with training wheels. Also, side note, don't feel the need to buy a fight stick to get into fighting games. A lot of people have them, but they're largely personal preference. They have a nice feel to them, but there's not really enough data connecting them to better results over your typical controller. The majority of pros use them because they've been in the game long enough to have built their muscle memory off of those old arcade machines. Now, once you've learned things like movement and normals and meter costs in your game of choice, it's time to pick your character. And one thing I absolutely advise against when picking your character is looking up a tier list. What you want most out of this stage is ease of use, not whatever is best. Some games even try to clue you in on who's the easiest, but they don't always know who's best for the general public. You should take this character into the lab, learn their normal attacks, get a feel for their range, and practice their special moves. And the most important thing you need to learn that will set you apart from 99% of players is how to block. And a lot of people get really turned off by this aspect. There's a viral tweet from a while ago that said something like, I didn't pay $60 to block, and honestly, you can't blame them.
You hold forward a lot.
Oh yeah, no,
So-
I didn't pay $70 to block. But now I am blocking. I'm blocking now. I'm
But your mileage may vary on how much you have to do this by game. The Guilty Gear series is known for having an explicit get off me button that you can use one time in a match. But when you first start learning how to get into a fighting game, your goal should not be to 100 hit combo dumpster your opponent, but simply learn how to put yourself into a safe enough position to win. When you build a solid defense against your opponent, you condition them into getting more desperate and throwing out something that you can punish. Punishing is simply the term used for whenever your opponent throws out something meaty or slow enough that you can respond to in kind by beating the shit out of them. Combine this with the sort of rock, paper, scissors knowledge of blocking and what can be blocked, and you'll be good to go. Crouching attacks beat standing blocks, crouching blocks beat standing and crouching attacks, jumping attacks beat crouching blocks, and grabbing beats standing blocks. Put some time into blocking jump-ins and low sweeps and combine this with some easy 2-hit combos and you'll have a good understanding of the basics. Now, like I said, you're definitely going to trade rounds with a lot of people before you find yourself pulling off anything cool. But once you start beating people, seeing what others can do, and maybe climb the ranks a little bit, then would be the time to consider things like combos that require a hair of execution. Or maybe learn a character that might have a playstyle that you like better. It's healthy to always start with the karate Shotokan man, but I always prefer picking someone that gets in my opponent's face and doesn't let them get a word in edgewise. Yeah, I don't like blocking either, fucking sue me. Now this is where our choice of game is going to come into play. Is this a versus game with flashy, high damage combos you have to learn a method for? Is this Guilty Gear and you have to learn the perfect time to spend your burst so that you can get out of jail? Does your character have some stupid-ass meter specific to them that specifies their game plan? I alluded to it earlier, but I myself am very partial to versus games. A lot of people are intimidated by the fact that you have to learn more than one character and that the combos are long as shit, but I am of the opinion that their 4-button attack setup as opposed to 6 makes them far easier to dive into. Both Marvel 3 and Dragon Ball FighterZ operate under very similar logic. It's not light, medium, heavy, punch and kick. The basics are light, medium, heavy, launcher, then chase them into the air for light, medium, heavy, and send them back down to earth again. And of course there's minute differences, and you need to learn when to throw in special moves and their application, but the move lists in these games aren't usually very long. Unless you play Dante. I play Dante. I'm a weird freak, I guess. I also think that these are the games that are the most fun to spend time in the trading mode with. It feels good to practice a flashy combos that takes your opponent up into the air and then back down to the ground and then manipulate them however you want, just to finish it with some big flashy anime explosion with a cute little scene that shows off your character's personality. This is juxtaposed by the slower, methodical single character games like the Street Fighter series that reward patient play with larger damage off of single hits but fewer hits in the combos as a whole. Except for Street Fighter 6, this one's kind of cranked it up. Now, I'm not a real fighting game god, I'm not a pro or anything, I haven't played in a tournament in I have no idea how long, but what I want this video to do is, at the very least, get you in at a beginner level. If even one person watches this and tries to pick up a new game, I will be happy. But there are two things that you can try and do to break out of that beginner level, and those are researching your game online and playing with your friends. Getting a friend to learn a fighting game with and become your anime rival to see who's better is one of the most fun video game experiences I've ever had. This happens to people all the time. It's great to go all Goku and Vegeta with someone and just trade rounds and beat the shit out of each other and all good fun knowing that both of your goals is to one-up the other. My last piece of advice is that if you get blown back by a certain technique or some kind of spam or a high tier character keeps knocking you down or pissing you off, to not let it get to you. While it does suck to lose, one thing that fighting games have over typical team games is that even if you do lose, if you have a shred of patience and introspection in you, you can identify what went wrong and work towards preventing it from happening again in the future, instead of getting mad because you got ganged up on by 5 guys like burgers and fries. These games have some of the most crushing defeats, but they also have some of the most fulfilling victories. They have one of the best online communities I've ever seen, and I'm willing to say that I'm happy to be a part of it. Both times I went to EVO, I was met with the most diverse crowd I had ever seen at a con, with people from different countries, different creeds, nationalities, gender identities, and reasons to love the game, with the only shared tissue between them being, hey, you wanna go play some Marvel? Traditional fighting games like these are part of video game history, and they've been around far longer than most of today's genres. And despite high highs and horrible lows, they've weathered the test of time to get us this sort of fighting game renaissance today. And I really think that there is a fighting game out there for any kind of player. You don't have to be the best, you don't have to master every character, or play the game with the largest audience. What matters is that you're willing to learn, have some fun, and get in there, and bash your head into the wall. Thank you all very much for watching. I really just wanted to babble on about something I love. I'm praying that this video comes out in the fall. I'm always working on like 4 different things. I'd like to say, like, comment, and subscribe. If you like what you see, any kind of interaction will greatly help my discoverability. Like I said, I'm not some fighting game pro, I'm just a super fan, so down below I'm gonna link people who are more knowledgeable about specific subjects than I. If you want to watch me make these videos live or game streams or like a realistic depiction of a panic attack, make sure to follow me on my Twitch. I'm probably live right now. Also, check me out on Twitter for daily ramblings and life updates. Thank you so very much to my patrons. I actually have a growing list now, and I am super appreciative. Thank you even extra more so to my drawing tier patrons. These are always super fun to make, and it feels nice to connect with the community a little bit like this. I always make these live about a week before the new video goes up, so if you want a personalized picture, make your way over to the Patreon, where I have a whole host of benefits for people across multiple tiers. Aside from that, support your local tournaments, send support to your favorite pro players. If a fighting game interests you, you know, wait for a discount and get it, and find me online, or, you know, find me in real life, beat the shit out of me. Call your mom. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye. Okay. I'm loosened up. I'm loose. I'm loose. I'm nice and loose. That's what they call me. I'm loose.